What if the most powerful thing you could say is absolutely nothing? It sounds impossible in a world where everyone is fighting to be heard. Every day, people compete for attention. They talk louder, post more, argue longer, and constantly try to prove themselves. Society teaches us that if we want respect, influence, or success, we have to speak up all the time. But psychology tells a very different story. Some of the most influential people in the world don't dominate conversations. They don't rush to explain themselves. They don't react to every criticism or defend every opinion. Instead, they understand something that most people never learn. Silence is a form of power. Not because silence is mysterious, but because it forces people to think. Have you ever noticed how uncomfortable silence makes some people feel? The moment a conversation becomes quiet, someone immediately starts talking. They fill the empty space with unnecessary words because silence creates uncertainty, and the human mind hates uncertainty. That's exactly why silence is so powerful. When people can't easily read you, they begin trying to figure you out. They wonder what you're thinking. They pay closer attention to your facial expressions, your body language, and even the smallest things you say. Suddenly, your words become more valuable because you don't waste them. Psychologists have studied this behavior for years. The less information people have about someone, the more their minds begin filling in the missing pieces. Sometimes they admire that person. Sometimes they misunderstand them. But one thing almost always happens. They keep thinking about them. This is why the quiet person in the room is often remembered long after the loudest person has been forgotten. Unfortunately, most people never discover this lesson until much later in life. Instead, they believe they must explain every decision, defend every criticism, answer every message, and react to every opinion. Without realizing it, they give away their emotional control to everyone around them. But people who truly understand the psychology of silence know something different. Not every opinion deserves a response. Not every argument deserves your attention. Not every insult deserves your anger. Sometimes your silence communicates more confidence than 100 perfectly chosen words ever could. That doesn't mean silence is about avoiding people or hiding your feelings. Healthy silence is intentional. It's knowing when speaking adds value, and when remaining quiet creates even greater impact. In today's video, we're going to explore the psychology behind silence and why it has such a powerful effect on the human mind. You'll discover why quiet people are often misunderstood, why silence makes some people uncomfortable, why it naturally attracts respect, and how mastering silence can completely change the way people see you. Some of these psychological principles are surprising. Others may explain experiences you've had for years without ever understanding why they happened. So don't skip this video, because the final lesson reveals the biggest mistake people make with silence. And once you understand it, you'll never communicate the same way again. Before we begin, if you enjoy videos about psychology, Sigma mindset, human behavior, and self-improvement, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Now, let's uncover the psychology of silence and why saying less may become one of the greatest advantages you'll ever have. Silence makes people curious about you. One of the most fascinating psychological effects of silence is that it naturally creates curiosity. Human beings are wired to seek explanations. Whenever information is missing, the brain immediately tries to fill in the gaps. That's why people often become more interested in someone who doesn't reveal everything about themselves than someone who shares every detail of their life. Think about the quiet person in a group conversation. While everyone else is speaking, joking, and trying to be noticed, that person simply observes. They don't interrupt. They don't constantly seek attention. Ironically, this often causes others to pay more attention to them. People begin asking themselves questions. What are they thinking? Why are they so calm? What do they know that I don't? Curiosity grows because the mind naturally dislikes uncertainty. Psychologists describe this as the information gap. When people don't have enough information about someone, they become motivated to learn more. Silence creates that gap. Instead of giving people all the answers, it encourages them to keep thinking about you long after the conversation ends. Of course, silence alone isn't enough. If your silence comes from fear or insecurity, people will often sense that. But when your silence comes from confidence and emotional control, it creates a completely different impression. You appear thoughtful instead of nervous, composed instead of desperate for attention. A person who speaks less but says something meaningful at the right moment often leaves a stronger impression than someone who talks without stopping. That's why silence isn't just the absence of words. It's a psychological tool that makes your presence more memorable. Silence gives you emotional control. Another powerful lesson in the psychology of silence is that it protects your emotions from controlling your decisions. Most people react immediately when they're criticized, insulted, or challenged. They speak before they think, hoping to defend themselves or prove they're right. Unfortunately, those emotional reactions often lead to regret. Silence creates something incredibly valuable: time. Even a few seconds of quiet give your brain the opportunity to process what's happening before your emotions take over. Instead of reacting impulsively, you begin responding intentionally. That small difference changes the outcome of countless conversations. People who remain calm during difficult moments are often viewed as more confident and emotionally mature. They don't feel pressured to answer every accusation or win every disagreement. They understand that emotional control is far more powerful than emotional reaction. Psychologists have found that self-control is one of the strongest predictors of long-term success in relationships, leadership, and decision-making. Silence strengthens that self-control because it interrupts the automatic habit of reacting without thinking. This doesn't mean ignoring every problem or refusing to communicate. Healthy silence is temporary and purposeful. It's choosing the right moment to speak instead of allowing anger, frustration, or fear to choose for you. The next time someone tries to provoke you, remember that your first reaction doesn't have to become your final response. Sometimes the strongest statement you can make is taking a breath, remaining silent for a moment, and speaking only after you've regained complete control of your emotions. People reveal more when you talk less. One of the most surprising psychological truths about silence is that the less you speak, the more other people tend to reveal about themselves. Most conversations are driven by a natural human desire to be heard and understood. When someone feels they have your full attention, they often become more comfortable sharing their thoughts, emotions, and experiences without even realizing it. Think about the people who always seem to know everything that's happening around them. In many cases, they aren't talking the most, they're listening the most. They ask a simple question, remain quiet, and allow the other person to continue speaking. The silence creates space, and people naturally rush to fill that space with more information. Psychologists explain that silence can make people slightly uncomfortable. Instead of allowing the quiet moment to continue, they begin talking again. Sometimes they reveal personal details they never intended to share. Other times they explain their decisions, admit their fears, or expose their true intentions. The longer you listen without interrupting, the more you learn. This doesn't mean using silence to manipulate people. It means understanding that listening is one of the most powerful communication skills you can develop. While others are focused on what they want to say next, you're gaining valuable insight into how they think. A person who listens carefully often understands people far better than someone who dominates every conversation. That's why silence doesn't make you less informed. It often makes you the most informed person in the room. Silence makes your words more valuable. In today's world, words are everywhere. Social media never stops. Conversations never seem to end. Everyone has an opinion, and everyone wants to be heard. That's exactly why silence has become so powerful. When words are constant, they lose value. But when someone speaks only when they have something meaningful to say, people naturally pay closer attention. Imagine two people in the same meeting. One speaks every few minutes, commenting on everything whether it's important or not. The other listens carefully, stays quiet for most of the discussion, and only speaks once. Which person's words are more likely to capture everyone's attention? In many cases, it's the second person. Psychologists call this the principle of scarcity. The less available something is, the more valuable it appears. The same principle applies to communication. When you don't waste words, every sentence carries greater weight. People begin expecting that if you've decided to speak, it's because you have something worth hearing. A Sigma understands this instinctively. They don't interrupt conversations just to be noticed. They don't argue simply to prove they're right. Instead, they observe, think carefully, and choose their words with intention. As a result, their opinions often have a stronger impact than those of people who speak constantly. This doesn't mean staying silent forever. It means making every word count. When your speech becomes intentional instead of automatic, people begin listening more carefully, respecting your opinions more deeply, and remembering what you say long after the conversation ends. And that's the true power of silence. It transforms ordinary words into something people can't ignore. Silence exposes people's true intentions. One of the most overlooked psychological effects of silence is that it reveals who people really are. Most individuals are comfortable when conversations are predictable and constant. But the moment you stop talking, stop explaining yourself, or stop reacting to everything they say, something interesting begins to happen. People start revealing their true intentions without realizing it. Some become uncomfortable and rush to fill the silence with endless talking. Others begin explaining themselves even though you never ask them to. A few may even become irritated because they can no longer predict what you're thinking. None of these reactions are caused by your words. They're caused by your silence. Psychologists often explain that uncertainty creates emotional pressure. When people can't easily read someone, they naturally become more aware of their own behavior. That's why silence often exposes insecurity, confidence, honesty, or hidden motives. The less you reveal, the more carefully people reveal themselves. A Sigma eventually understands that observing is often more valuable than speaking. Instead of reacting immediately, they pay attention to how people behave when no one is guiding the conversation. Actions become clearer, emotions become visible, and true character slowly appears. This doesn't mean becoming cold or distant. It simply means allowing silence to do some of the work for you. Instead of chasing answers through endless questions, you let people answer questions you never even asked. Many of life's greatest truths are discovered not while speaking, but while quietly observing. Silence is more powerful than winning arguments. Most people believe that winning an argument proves intelligence or strength. Psychology suggests something very different. In many situations, the person who chooses not to argue has far greater emotional control than the person determined to win. Think about how arguments usually end. Rarely does one person suddenly admit they were completely wrong. Instead, emotions grow stronger, voices become louder, and both sides leave feeling frustrated. Even when someone technically wins the argument, they often lose something much more valuable: peace, energy, and sometimes even the relationship itself. A Sigma learns that not every disagreement deserves attention. Some people argue because they want understanding. Others argue because they want control, attention, or validation. Learning to recognize the difference is a sign of maturity. Silence isn't surrender. It's choosing where your energy deserves to go. When you refuse to react emotionally, you remove the fuel that keeps pointless conflict alive. Your calmness often speaks louder than any clever response ever could. Psychologists have found that emotionally intelligent people are less likely to react impulsively during conflict. They pause, think, and decide whether the conversation is actually worth continuing. That pause often changes the entire outcome. The strongest people don't feel the need to prove they're right in every situation. They understand that protecting their peace is far more important than winning temporary debates. Sometimes, the greatest victory isn't having the last word. It's realizing that you never needed to speak at all. Silence creates a strong presence. One of the most surprising psychological effects of silence is that it creates a presence people naturally notice. Many assume that the loudest person in the room is the most confident, but real confidence rarely needs to announce itself. People who are comfortable with silence often project a sense of calm, self-control, and emotional stability that immediately captures attention. Think about the last time you met someone who spoke very little but made everyone listen when they finally did speak. Their words carried weight because they weren't trying to dominate the conversation. They observed first, thought carefully, and spoke with intention. That kind of communication creates respect because it signals confidence rather than insecurity. Psychologists explain that people are naturally drawn to individuals who appear emotionally composed. When someone doesn't feel the need to constantly prove themselves, others often assume they possess knowledge, experience, or confidence. Whether that assumption is always true or not, it influences the way people react. A Sigma understands that presence isn't created by talking more. It's created by being fully aware of the moment. Strong posture, calm eye contact, controlled emotions, and thoughtful silence often leave a far greater impression than endless conversation. Of course, silence alone isn't enough. It must be supported by confidence, integrity, and consistent actions. Otherwise, it becomes awkward instead of powerful. But when silence comes from genuine self-assurance, it becomes one of the strongest forms of communication. The people who leave the deepest impression are rarely the ones who demand attention. More often, they're the ones who never have to ask for it. The biggest secret: silence is powerful only when it's intentional. The greatest lesson in the psychology of silence is that silence itself is not automatically powerful. Its true power depends entirely on why you're silent. There's a huge difference between remaining quiet because you're afraid and remaining quiet because you're in control. Silence born from fear usually comes from insecurity. You stay quiet because you're afraid of rejection, conflict, or criticism. Instead of protecting your peace, that kind of silence prevents you from expressing yourself and standing up for your values. Intentional silence is completely different. It comes from confidence, patience, and emotional intelligence. You speak when your words add value, and you remain quiet when silence serves a greater purpose. You don't react to every opinion because you understand that not everything deserves your attention. This is the lesson every Sigma eventually learns. Silence isn't about avoiding life. It's about choosing your moments wisely. It's knowing that your energy is limited and refusing to waste it on arguments, negativity, or people who have no desire to understand you. When your silence becomes a choice instead of a fear, everything changes. Your words become more meaningful, your emotions become more stable, your presence becomes stronger, and the people around you begin seeing you differently, not because you've changed who you are, but because you've learned the power of saying less. So the next time you're tempted to react immediately, pause for a moment. Ask yourself whether speaking will truly improve the situation or whether silence will communicate something even more powerful. If this video helped you see silence from a new perspective, let us know in the comments which lesson surprised you the most. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more videos about psychology, Sigma mindset, human behavior, and self-improvement. Thanks for watching. Stay calm, stay confident, and remember, sometimes the strongest voice is the one that doesn't need to be heard.